exactly is
Sure.
daily stand-up in Scrum?
Daily stand up, it is like again like it's very good aspect in the scrums, and the meeting happen like between the team, like scrum master will be there, developer, tester, and product owner. As a testers, I need to answer like three questions, like what I'm doing today, and what I did yesterday, and what like blocking me to do some certain works. Like what is the problem I'm getting to doing testing or something that I need to discuss. It is about the 15 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes meeting will be there just in the morning time, and that importance of that like daily stand-up meetings will be like how the progressions of the work is going, like how like work is remaining or how much time have, and what is the technical issues are facing all the teams we need to discuss, and what what is the next steps to be done to go in the progress or to go to complete the process. So this is the meeting we have, and all the team will be there,
Yeah,
and this is the three questions I need to answer.
yeah, absolutely spot on those three questions, and I'm pretty happy that you understand that these are the three questions that you need to discuss in those 15 minutes. So it's not more than 15 minutes. So usually daily Scrum should be a 15-minute time box event, but most of the companies they most of the time exceed that 15-minute. So it's the role of Scrum Master to ensure that daily stand up happens every day and it is time boxed. Okay, so Scrum Master ensures that. And it's the meeting, or it's basically the purpose
Right.
is to inspect the overall progress, which we have covered very well. So, overall progress, and if required, then adjust the upcoming plan work to adjust with the sprint goal that has been defined. So,
Right.
absolutely fine. Correct answer there. And a couple of more things you can go and read over the internet. Key thing to remember there is
Right.
the Scrum Master's role, 15-minute time box event. So it should not be more than 15 minutes. And if there is anyone apart
More
from
than
the
15 minutes.
development team, say for example, product owner or any other stakeholders, they do not interfere in any other in the overall this daily scrum, right? So it's not a status meeting. There the people
Right.
or
Right. Absolutely
stakeholders who
right.
are
Mm.
there within the meeting, they can just stand and watch the discussion that is happening within the development team, but it's not a status call to take the status of the members of the team, which is very ideal situation. It usually doesn't happen in the practical scenario. You are aware of it. I'm aware of it. Most of the organizations do not implement it correctly, but as per the interview answer, it is not a status meeting. And once we are following Agile, once we are following Scrum, it's our responsibility as a team as well to understand it correctly and then also educate others that this is how it should be done. Right. So that's the overall of it. But very good answer, and I like the three questions that you will definitely that you ask in the 15-minute time box daily Scrum. Okay. What is backlog grooming?
Backlog grooming, it is again in the Scrum. So like backlog grooming is the regular sessions we have that is backlog. Whatever the product in the backlog we have. So we need to review on that. We need to discuss about that backlog items, and we have to go for the priorities of that also. That is main purpose of the grooming backlog. It is like we have to like update it on those backlog items, and we have to planning for the next backlog product also, like next sprint in the, and in the backlog it is known as also like backlog management and pre-planning also they are calling sometimes user time it is. And the backlog in the backlog have to maintain some of the like key point, like we have to removing outdated user stories or serve tasks. We need to remove all those things. We need to add like newly user stories to the backlog. So this is like, and we need to reassign or assign the user story point and that estimations we have to do. And we have to go for that like epics, like big user stories. We have to broad user stories to the smaller user stories. We need to focus on those things. And this is like backlog growing. We have this is
Right.
nothing but we have updating that backlog, like
Yeah.
how need to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, all your points, I agree with those. Backlog grooming is also known as backlog refinement. Now, if we talk about backlog in Scrum or Agile
Yes,
development, it's basically a set of user stories or requirements. So, in Agile, in Scrum, we have user stories, right? So, or high level, we'll be having Epic. So, Epic is a high level, big user story which needs to be broken into smaller user stories which we can build in the sprint, which is 2 to 4 week cycle. So when you mentioned like backlog grooming, we
absolutely.
divide into smaller parts which can fit in. We estimate the product owner, then changes the priorities, so prioritization, and it can be done with product owner with some of the team members or all of the team members. So usually in my teams usually we
Yes,
put 10% of the team's time for backlog grooming because team is working on sprint 2, say for example. After sprint 2 they'll move to sprint 3, so the work items for sprint 3 need to be ready, and that's what we are doing in backlog grooming. So we are refining the user stories and putting all the relevant information so that those user stories or requirements are ready to be built. So absolutely fantastic. You have covered all the points. I just added a
right,
little bit points there. So I do not deny that I don't agree with the points that you have mentioned.
right.
I'm just adding
We
more.
have to give the priorities as well as
Yes.
yes,
Yes. Okay.
absolutely.
So yeah, that's what backlog grooming or backlog refinement is. Okay. What are the key differences between the API and web service?
If you see the difference between the API and web services, there are lots of difference between that. And I would say that API is like all the web services are API, but all the APIs are not web services. And web services are support only HTTP. But if you see that API is supported on like HTTP plus HTTPS, so that will be same for that. So, and web services are also like it is supported or it is format only XML format or something. But if you go for API, various API, if you see that it is support like XML, JSON format also, and HTML and text file also it is supporting. And if you see that web services are also access and web service securities, whereas if you see that API, it is like SSL plus that HTTP. So, and if you see that major difference that web services need a network or internet to run the web services, but API don't need internet or something. So this is all the difference I can mention. So this is,
Right.
and
So
if you see that web services also like,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, go ahead. So that is the difference I think I have seen. Like,
Okay. Okay. So up to some extent, your answer is correct. Okay. And you have covered some very good points there that, you know, about the difference between the API and web service. Do you know any example? Can you give me any example that this is an API and this is a web service? Have you worked on Selenium?
yeah,
So do you have any example? What is WebDriver?
example I can give like WebDriver is an interface. So driver we have interface, and under that interface we have like method like find element and find elements like method we have, and under that we have the class, we have the Chrome driver and Firefox driver, all those things we have.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
example I can give that when you send the request,
Yeah. Go ahead.
when you send the request to the like anything like in web services we have to give the XML code, so that will be like we need to it in XML code. If you see that it is maintaining hierarchy, so you have to follow like from the parent to all those things. So and giving the server giving the response with that XML only to
Yeah.
fetching the data or something. But
Okay.
here, if you go for the API will go for the URL, in that URL, and will get the response with the JSON format or XML, whatever
Okay.
format.
So I think there
So
is a
this is
little
the
bit of
example.
confusion between the API and web service that you have. So you are getting confused between SOAP and REST, which I'll cover later. But API and web service, the key differences I'll iterate so that it's helpful. So there are few points that you have mentioned as part of this answer, which are absolutely correct. Okay. But few things you have got confused between SOAP and REST. So I'll cover the key differences between API, and I'll also give you examples so that you can tackle this question. So what an API is, an API basically is an interface, as you mentioned about the WebDriver. So WebDriver is an API, okay? And an API is
Right.
used, it's an interface between two applications. Okay. So they can communicate with each other. When we talk about the WebDriver
Absolutely.
API, okay, the WebDriver
Absolutely.
API doesn't require any internet as such. So you install the WebDriver, you configure Eclipse ID, you import that, and then it's on your local machine. And that WebDriver API communicates with the browser drivers and opens the browser for you, right? So there is no, it's within the machine. There is no network as such involved.
Right.
Okay. So API will act as an interface between two applications. So you have the WebDriver API and you have the Chrome browser or Chrome driver. So your WebDriver API interacts,
Right.
interfaces with the Chrome driver, Firefox driver, and other driver, right? So that's what an API is. It necessarily doesn't, it doesn't need it doesn't have to be a web based. Okay, so that's the API. And when we talk about the web service, it's the web service. It's basically over the HTTP. Okay, so over the internet. If it requires the internet,
Yes.
so say for example, you talked about the yatra.com or any other travel website. So whatever web services or APIs are exposed there from those airline websites, those are the web services because they communicate over the network, right? So that's the key difference,
Over internet. Yes.
right? Okay, so that's the key difference, and web service is an API. So all APIs are not web service, but all web services are APIs. Okay, so a web service is an API wrapped in HTTP. Okay, so when you wrap the API into
HTTP.
HTTP,
Yes. Right.
that is a web service. But because Selenium WebDriver is not wrapped in HTTP, it's on your local machine. It's also an API, right? Selenium WebDriver is an API, it's on your local machine. It communicates with other browser drivers. That is also an API, but it is not communicating over HTTP, right? And the other key difference is that a web service usually you will
Absolutely.
find like SOAP, REST, XML. RPC for communication. APIs can use any style, right? So like your jar file, the jar Selenium API. Okay, so that they can use any style for communication. So couple of key differences. So these examples, if you understand, you go through Google and search all the other points that you can think of. You have covered very good points, which some of them were correct. So keep those and remove
I'll
the
go through that.
confusion.
I'll go through some of the
Yeah.
examples.
So I hope the confusion between API and web service would have been removed now with this example, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So web service, web is internet, right? Web. So when you can remember like that, web service, okay, something
Right.
related to the network. API, something which could be network, but could be local as well, right? I mean, wouldn't be necessarily HTTP. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. All right. So what exactly do you understand by SOAP? Have you heard about SOAP?
So yeah, so also it is a type of web services. So there are two types of like web service. If you say that SOAP and REST, and SOAP it is a, if you say known also for like single object access protocol. So that SOAP is also as an XML based protocol, which is like accessing web service over the HTTP, and that XML it is like intermediate language which is accessing the data between the applications, and all the programming are using that XMLs to providing the like data access of the application. But if you see, there is a like no standard specifications on users like in XML across the all like programming language. So because of that only like SOAP has came into the picture, and SOAP can what SOAP is the like communications applications protocol, and SOAP is a like format for the sending or receiving the message. So also it is like an independent platform that is independent on language. So this is about the SOAP. It is a like uh, protocol actually that based on the HTTP. So on the
Yeah.
web service. So this is about the SOAP I can say.
Yes, absolutely correct there. Now, because we are from testing background, so the whole point of asking this question in API testing, SOAP, and I'll ask rest later, is basically to understand as part of the testing team or the tester's role, whether you understand the key differences which will help you to excel in that particular testing role. And then when you communicate with other members of the team, say for example, developers,
Right.
then you will ask the right set of questions, right? So you have explained about the SOAP, the definition, and it exclusively relies on the XML for messaging. So XML is the key thing within SOAP. The other important thing you should always remember and mention in the interview is that WSDL files are the key to SOAP-based services, right? So you get a web service description language, you get the WSDL file, right? WSDL, and it's a XML-based definition language, so WSDL.
Yeah,
So
yes.
whenever you have to test a SOAP service, and if a developer has given you a WSDL file, as a tester, you know that this is a SOAP service, right? So this is the whole point of asking this
Right, right.
question, whether by just getting a little bit of information from the developer or within the team, you will be able to understand what set of questions you need to ask, right? So your answer is correct. Just include that SOAP is WSDLs are the
Yes,
central
yes,
thing or the
definitely.
key
Because
thing for SOAP based services, right? And SOAP can in SOAP you can define its own security.
Mm.
SOAP can
I think there is
transfer
some issue,
over.
network issue is going on.
Is it fine?
Network issue. Yeah, now it is fine.
Okay. So the transfer, so SOAP can transfer over HTTP, SMTP, and other protocols, etc. So REST will cover in the next question. But remember, key thing, always mention about the WSDL, okay? And mention that SOAP exclusively
Yes, yes.
relies on the XML to provide the messaging. So these are the two key things, because as a tester, you need
And receiving
the
message, yes.
payloads, you need the WSDL file, and then you need the payloads and what exactly you will do with those payloads to test it, right? So if you want to learn about the SOAP web service, etc., I have the full tutorial series on SOAP UI. I'm not sure if you have watched it, but it's like 30 plus videos, which will cover each and every aspect of the API
I
testing.
I I I haven't seen that videos,
Okay, just
but
browse through.
most of the time I'm using that REST API.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll
Yeah.
go through that only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But most
nowadays,
of the time I
mostly
think REST are using in the in the company. Yeah.
that's correct.
So
Yeah, that's correct. So nowadays, mostly you will find REST implementation many places. But then, if you go to banks and there are
mm,
older implementations, so I have worked very extensively on the SOAP web service. Just like last year, I worked on the whole project, which was all SOAP, or all SOAP services. So it helps overall. Okay, but key difference you should mention. Okay, what do you understand by REST? So you have covered SOAP. Now what is REST?
REST again I can say it is stand for representational state transfer. So and that representational state transfer it is like architecture style. It is providing to the computer to communicate each other or between the systems. And in the REST, if you see that in order to use the REST, a web service needs a RESTful. But if you see the constants of the RESTful or REST, that is client service, stateless, and you can see the constants of that REST, that is uniform interface. Again, I can say layered systems, code they mesh. So this is, and for the REST, it is like used for the HTTP method over like we have the more important method we have that is get, post, put, and delete method. So that we need to communicate with it.
Okay, okay, good. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't able to hear, so there was some disturbance in the network, but I did hear a couple of
Yeah, because of
key
network.
points. Just want to add there, as I mentioned, that in the SOAP question, you will mention about the WSDL. In the REST, you will mention about the uniform resource identifiers, or URIs. Okay. So REST APIs use URIs, uniform resource identifiers, to address the resources. Okay. Because this is the key thing to a tester, to identify whether you are testing a REST web service or a SOAP web service. Okay. So that's the key thing that I would recommend you mention that. And then the rest thing you have mentioned, that it's an architectural style, it is lightweight, it transfers over HTTP only. So all those points are absolutely fine. You go ahead and mention that. Now, when somebody asks the SOAP and REST question, it's basically to understand that as a tester, you understand these services, and if given, then you will be able to identify and test them properly, because you know what these are. Okay, and how they look like, whether you'll be looking for WSDL or whether you'll be
Right,
looking for
right.
URIs. Okay, what are the common HTTP methods supported by REST web service? Some common methods, just a couple of them.
So basically, we're using like uh, four method we are using to post method and delete method. These four we are using the most of the time we are using the API or in the postman if you see that, but we are not using those things. But these four are very important, and these four are we are using most of the time. We are using these four. And if you see that gate method, if you like to use gate method to retrieve the data from the resource or from the database, if you want to like to get the data from database, then we have to go for the gate method. If you see the post method, to use the post method, it is creating the data to the database. Something if you want to create some data, if you want to like enter something, then you have to go for the post method in the database. But put method, it is going to update the data. If you like changing any name or any column or anything you need to update, then you have to go for the put method. Again, delete method, it is again deleting the data. You need to delete or you need to anything column you don't want to like be there in the database, so you need to go for the delete method. So
Right.
this is the method we are using. Page also is there. Page, I think it is again it is like for updating or something, updating for the database. Page and push are working for uh, similar kind of thing. So this
Right.
is the method we are using in that HTTP to communicate all those things.
Right. Okay. Absolutely correct. So you have answered the key methods. So you use get, post, put, delete, patch. So these are the key ones. I mean, if you are doing the API testing, REST testing, you will definitely have used these ones for sure. So you have named all of these along with the explanation, which is absolutely correct. Now there are more methods. So in Postman, if you go through the drop down, there are many more methods, but that's fine.
Yes,
You
yes,
can go
many
through
more.
and read what all they do as you go along with the testing. But these are the key ones, and you have good understanding what exactly they are and what they do. Now I'll go a little bit deeper on the differences of put and post. So what is the difference between put and post method?
Post again, I have mentioned already. Post method whenever you want to create any database or resource, like already like data creating the database already we have in the database, or something we need to create new database or something like with the name or user password or something, then we have to go for the post method. And in the post method, in the put method, what we can do, like already we have the table format or database we have. So what we have to do, if anything we need to modify in the existing database or anything we need to update, then we have to go for the put method. So this is the difference, key difference we have. That is, post method it is for creating, and put method it is for updating or modifying existing database. So we are not creating anything in the post method.
Right. Okay.
So this is
Good.
the key difference.
Right. Okay. Absolutely correct there. So post will create a new resource or new data using the post method. And
Yes.
one more thing you should always add there, because your understanding is very good. So add a point that post method is not idempotent. So have you heard about idempotent word? Have you came across it?
No.
Okay. So this is important word, so remember about it. So when we say post is not idempotent, what this means in the context of REST APIs, when you will make multiple identical requests. So what post method will do is it will create a new record every time. Say for example, if I create using a post method my name, first name and last name, say Manish Verma, okay? And I want to create the name in the database in the name field, in the
Yes.
name table. So if I use post method, I'll send a request once, it will create one record with Manish Verma. I'll send again, it will insert another record, another row. with Manish Verma. So every
Right.
time I'll send a post request, it will
Right.
create a new record every time. So there will be duplicate records with same data that you will send. And that is what it is
Right.
not indempotent. Okay. When we say, so post is not indempotent. When we say indempotent,
Okay.
it what it means is it is put method. So in the put method, what happens is it is the method to modify the resource where you send the data. Say, for example, put is very similar to post. The difference is if there is no data as such in the database. So, say, for example, I want to insert a record, my first name and last name. So, I'll use put method. It will insert a record. All right. So, it will insert my name, Manish Verma, in the table. The next time I'll
Right.
send the request, it will see that if the data with the same details exists, it will overwrite the entire data and it won't create the new record. Got it? So put method is idempotent. However, post method is not idempotent. You got the difference there? So you can explain this with this particular example.
Right.
Okay. Now we'll
I'll
come.
remember that word because I'm not come across on that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'll,
yeah. Just
yeah.
remember that it will be really helpful and understand with the example. Now I'll
I
come to
think
patch as
somehow
well.
I have heard one or twice, but I'm not remember. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, most of the time you just keep using it. So these words are helpful when you go for interviews, right? So when you understand, when you go with the
Right.
example, when
Right.
you understand, when you explain these with different examples, it makes a very good impression with the interviewer, right?
It
So
helps. Right.
yeah. So I'll move to the similar because there is one more method which you mentioned, the
Right.
patch method. So what is patch
Right.
method?
Because similar with the port, I think it is like updating the data to the database. So this is the difference I can understand because we are not using much.
Right. Okay. So I'll explain the difference, this difference as well, because it is really helpful to understand the key differences because once you understand the basics, your learning
Yeah.
becomes really enjoyable. Okay. So we have understood about post, we have
Right.
understood about put. Now patch is similar to put. Okay. The difference is patch
Right.
will help you to apply partial update. Okay. When we say partial update, now say for example, I want to update only my last name in the database. So just updating the last name is possible using patch. So I can use the patch method and I can
Okay.
say update my last name from this to this. In my request, I'll send like that. Okay. Is it clear?
Now getting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.